A Puerto Rican mayor getting busted on fraud charges for stealing over $3 million in federal funds. Benjamin Arif of the Conservative Tribune reports that blame Donald Trump is the mantra of the left and the media these days, with almost every negative news story connected to the president in some way. And that was certainly who got the blame after Hurricane Maria hit the island of Puerto Rico back in October of 2017. Despite the fact that the U.S. government sent emergency workers, supplies, and billions of dollars to the territory, its Democrat-allied politicians still pointed a finger at the president, and the left-leaning media happily spread the blame Trump narrative. Now, when Trump was there, he remarked on their budget, which set off that nasty Puerto Rican mayor. Take a look.
Well, thank you very much. It was a great trip and a beautiful place, and you really got hit. There's no question about it. Now, I hate to tell you, Puerto Rico, but you've thrown our budget a little out of whack because we've spent a lot of money on Puerto Rico, and that's fine. We've saved a lot of lives. If you look at every death is a horror, but if you look at a real catastrophe like Katrina, and you look at the tremendous hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that died, and you look at what happened here with really a storm that was just totally overpowering. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. What is your death count as of this moment? 17?
16 certified.
16 people certified. 16 people versus in the thousands. You can be very proud of all of your people, all of our people working together. 16 versus literally thousands of people.
The San Juan mayor, Carmen Yulín Cruz, and others made it clear that they held Trump responsible. Quote, "We are dying, and you, Trump, are killing us with the inefficiency and the bureaucracy," she said during a television conference in early October with her nasty feminist shirt. Take a look.
Today's President Trump has lashed out at anyone who criticizes his administration's response to the hurricane. One of his harshest critics is the mayor of San Juan. After meeting with the president on Tuesday, she went on MSNBC upset about what the president did. Here's what she said.
He was insulting to the people of Puerto Rico. He said something like, Puerto Rico, you really have taken our budget out of whack because of all the money withdrawn.
Now, you've heard what she had to say, but did you see what she was wearing? During that interview, she's wearing a sweater. Later, though, when she spoke to Univision, she took it off and she proudly displayed this shirt with the word nasty on it. She said she wore it to send a message to the president, who attacked her on Twitter after she made an impassioned plea for help for Puerto Rico.
Now, fast forward to this week, it turns out that sure enough, there was plenty of inefficiency and bureaucracy in Puerto Rico, but it looks like the island's own liberal politicians were the ones behind it. According to the Associated Press, at the center of the illegal scheme is Miguel Ortiz Velez, who served as a mayor. He belongs to the Popular Democrat Party, which is affiliated with the more well-known Democratic Party here in the United States. Now, there may be more arrests to follow as well. Government officials said that more corruption is suspected and additional Puerto Rican officials are under scrutiny. That corruption, well, it doesn't point to President Trump. It leads right to the same leftist Democrats who are trying to point fingers at President Trump the entire time. I think it's time for them to start taking a look at this nasty woman next.
Drain the swamp, Puerto Rico. A Harvard-educated Puerto Rico-based CEO is now fearing for his safety, receiving multiple threats for exposing the incompetence and the corruption of the Puerto Rican government in its response to Hurricane Maria. Jorge Rodriguez is the CEO of an international engineering firm. It works with medical and pharmaceutical companies. He published an opinion piece in the New York Post entitled "Inept Puerto Rican Government Riddled with Corruption." He says, quote, "For the last 30 years, the Puerto Rican government has been completely inept at handling regular societal needs. So I just don't see it functioning in a crisis like this one. Even before the hurricane hit, water and power systems were already broken. And our $118 billion debt crisis, it's a result of government corruption and mismanagement." Let's bring in that San Juan-based CEO who wrote that op-ed. He's Jorge Rodriguez. Good to see you, Jorge.
How are you?
What kind of threats have you received?
Well, it's been a lot of hate mail and threats. They're going to kick me out of the country, that I don't belong here, that I'm not a Puerto Rican, that I'm, throwing them under the bus, that I'm selling them. shame on me. Very obviously, in very tough terms, I cannot say in terms of publicly, but enough for me to get an armed guard. Obviously, I'm an engineer. I just run a business. Never done anything with government, so I got extremely scared. And then for my safety, I had to get some 24/7 armed guard.
Well, this sounds awful. Jorge,
Yes.
can you tell us what corruption and what is the incompetence that you see in the Puerto Rican government?
Well, it's probably 40 years. So remember, we're not in debt because we didn't get enough money for very real uses that we had, right? So we're 3.7 million people. Over 40 years, we've used, if you take the service charge of raising the bonds money, it's probably about, it comes out to be probably not, it's 118, so it comes out to be about 82 billion, 85 billion in 35 years. We don't have anything to claim for in terms of assets. We have like a coliseum, basketball coliseum, concert venue. We have a convention center. Nothing else. We don't have schools. We don't have bridges. We don't have roads. We don't have an airport. So obviously, it's just obvious. I'm not saying anything that is new. It's been totally mishandled, misappropriated, and just the corruption of 40 years that has, just eroded all our structures, our systems, and our processes in terms of government providing the societal needs of its community.
Jorge, where did the money go?
I think it went to the pockets of politicians and their contractors that are, playing, how you say it, I don't know how you may say it in English, a good word, but, it's, we call it pick a span. It's like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, and they just, between them. It's very simple. That's why you have, we have three, between poor people, mid-class people, and rich people. You have a very small percentage, 2 or 3 that are rich, then our middle class, which is just living, and then the poor. So our income per capita for the last 40 years has been 18,000. It went from 16,000 up to 18,000. Mississippi 30 years ago was almost the same as ours. In those 30 years, Mississippi almost 2.5 times higher, and we just stay the same.
Wow, that's interesting. Jorge, thank you. That's really interesting analysis there. Jorge, we'd love to have you back, and please stay safe. Okay, stay safe.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So sorry about those threats you're getting. Thank you, Jorge.
Joining me now is Congressman Ron DeSantis of Florida, a key member of several committees, including Foreign Affairs, Judiciary, and Oversight. He's also a member of the Freedom Caucus. Congressman, good to see you. Nobody would begrudge the people of Puerto Rico after everything they've been through of anything they need. But if officials are getting rich with aid that's supposed to go to people who are starving, who are hungry, who deserve relief, that's a crime. That needs to be stopped. How do we monitor that?
Well, you're right. Not only is wasting tax dollars, it's stealing from the hurricane victims in Puerto Rico. We saw this corruption after Katrina in places in New Orleans with a corrupt mayor. Unfortunately, in Puerto Rico, you've had a lot of corruption in the government for a long time. So I think that the administration should absolutely be very forward-leaning in policing that. If you can hold somebody accountable very publicly and very directly, I think that may deter others from taking a similar course. And it's just a tragic situation that some of those supplies aren't going to people who've really had their whole lives turned upside down. But there's just people who just don't get it in our society, unfortunately.
Well, and let's be specific about how it all happened. I mean, the bloated bureaucracy that existed in Puerto Rico for decades literally was a result of the welfare state. They had all the benefits of a welfare society without all of the responsibilities that are entailed in providing those services to the public. And the governor's trying to change things. Governor Rosillo is trying to change things, but he's only been in there for, I guess, a little less than a year, and it takes a long time. In the meantime, billions of dollars of aid are going in to a corrupt system. It's a tough thing to handle.
Well, you also had in 2008 to 2012, Luis Fortuño, Republican governor, was very reform-minded. He was instituting reforms. Then he lost a narrow election in 2012. And so we had 4 years where there really wasn't much done to deal with any of the problems at the government. Now I think this governor is trying to do that. But you're right. There's been so many problems that have built up year after year that it's a tough situation. Yeah. But put aside the hurricane, which is obviously very difficult circumstances, the fiscal situation there was really disastrous. And so this is really, I think, a time for the leaders in Puerto Rico to say, you know what, we've got to do this a better way. I think the governor's trying to do that. I
want to talk about the fiscal situation regarding the whole country and our taxes. The president, of course, he's going to have trouble with the Democrats. They're labeling his tax reform plan just for the wealthy, which, of course, is ridiculous. But even a lot of Republicans, under the guise of deficit reduction, are suggesting that you know, they couldn't possibly accept it under certain circumstances. Here is Senator Corker talking about this on National Public Radio a couple of days ago. Take a listen.
Unless it reduces deficits, let me say that one more time, unless it reduces deficits and does not add to deficits with reasonable and responsible growth models, and unless we can make it permanent, I don't have any interest in it.
I don't have any. I mean, the American people have a lot of interest in it. They have a big stake in it. The arrogance of saying, I don't have any interest in it unless it's everything I want. I mean, that's not the way you get stuff done, is it?
That is the swamp speaking. That is what the voters are so frustrated about, to try to put up any roadblock you can to prevent this president from succeeding. That is not what our voters sent us here to do. Our voters sent us here to get things done and to help the president pass this key tax reform. Here's the thing, though, David. These guys don't complain. The establishment Republicans, they don't complain about deficits when they're spending like drunken sailors.
They've been there. They've been there for years, and the deficit has gone up.
Why not do a really bold tax cut, a really bold tax reform, and then pair that with reductions and limits on domestic spending? There's no reason a Republican Congress couldn't do that, but it's telling the people who are opposing tax reform because of deficits, they're not willing to deal with our spending problem.
Well, I'll give you a reason why they don't want to do it, and that's partly because of the swamp itself. I'm told that lobbyists are just going nuts inside the Beltway, that they're knocking on every door in Congress. We had Congressman Meadows in from your Freedom Caucus saying that just yesterday morning, he had 4 groups of lobbyists in to talk about how they wanted to save their particular deductions. Are you getting the same knocks on your door?
The estimate is there's going to be $1 billion spent in lobbying on this tax bill because we have a 70,000-page tax code. It didn't get that way by accident. There are a lot of perks. There are a lot of special interest giveaways in there. But here's the thing. We have a chance to really do something that will lay a good foundation for economic growth for our country into the future. Yes, the market's done good. Yes, there's sentiment, optimism because of this president. But if we don't provide this foundation, you know, we're not going to be able to grow 3.5% consistently. So yes, that's happening. That's how the swamp works. This is a chance for Republicans to rise above that and do what's best for taxpayers rather than do what's best for Washington's interests.
We're following new developments in Puerto Rico. While multiple FEMA shipping containers packed with supplies for Hurricane Maria survivors are missing. 4 have been recovered across the island, and we've just learned that 2 other containers were found last night, but 6 are still missing. They're believed to be locked and full of unused supplies that were meant to help tens of thousands of people. Well, CBS News correspondent David Begnaud has been following the situation in Puerto Rico since Maria devastated the island, and he's with me now from Dallas via Skype. Okay, so this is confounding. David, you spoke to a FEMA spokesperson. What can you tell us?
So here's the deal. Let's start with what happened last night. 2 FEMA trailers were found on random private property. Apparently, it was the mayor of Utuado who initially alerted authorities a couple of days ago and said, hey, I think one of your shipping containers is here. Now, why is this all of a sudden happening? 2.5 weeks ago, there had been a report on the island by a radio station that some trailers had been found on property owned by the government. The National Guard came forward and said, oops, we should have distributed supplies in the trailers. We will. Ever since then, We picked up on it, we reported it, and it's been in the news. So what's happened is all of a sudden these FEMA trailers are now popping up around the island. So you have 3 that popped up in Utuado. The mayor called about one of them. Here's the deal, Anne Marie. In one of the shipping containers that they were able to open in Utuado, they were filled with cots. Now, here's the catch. When FEMA delivered the trailer to the area that it was supposed to be, it didn't have cots in them. So somebody took the supplies out and then filled the trailer with cots. Here's the bottom line. Let me walk you through the process of how it worked. FEMA would have a trailer filled up with supplies. Then they would deliver it to a municipality, right? And the municipality's responsibility would be to distribute the supplies to the people there who needed it. They'd call FEMA back and say, hey, your trailer's ready. Come pick it up. 12 of them went unaccounted for, just missing. Now, FEMA says here's the context. We distributed more than 10,000 trailers. To lose only 12 of them is pretty impressive. Maybe so. But consider this. In every one of those FEMA trailers was essential supplies, cots, water, food, battery, baby products that could have been used for tens of thousands of people. Let me walk you through some of what we know. There were 3 other trailers that were found in a municipality known as Toa Alta. It was found on private property, and the man there will not give FEMA permission to come on his property. So FEMA, through their own federal protective police force that they have, security force, is going to obtain a warrant to come back on that man's property and to get their shipping containers. Every container had a transponder, a tracking device. What FEMA believes is that the batteries either died or somebody removed the tracking device, and that's why they lost them. But the bottom line is most of the containers they've not been able to open, and those they have opened didn't really contain the supplies that were originally in there when FEMA delivered them. Right before I toss it back to you, and I know you're going to have some questions, but we've confirmed that at least, so of the 3 that were found in Toa Alta, right, 1 had originally been delivered to Canovanas. Another one had originally been delivered to Humacao. Another one was delivered to the Puerto Rico Emergency Management Agency, and another one was delivered to the Puerto Rico National Guard. So how did they get from all those places to Utuado and Toa Alta? It's not easy to move those, Anne Marie.
No, it is not. We are talking about massive containers. I think about when I order something on Amazon, how many times I have to sign off on it so people know I have received it. I presume there's a similar process here.
There is.
And so,
there is.
And I would expect that the mayors of some of these towns, the governor perhaps, is expecting these deliveries. So then, you know, what are we hearing from the governor? What are we hearing from the mayors who might have said, oh, you know, I thought we were going to get a trailer last week?
All right. Now you're getting the real good questions. So I've been trying to get somebody from the governor's office to give me a straight answer on exactly how they're involved or what they have to say about all this. And I have not been able to get a comment from the governor's office in the last 5 days. I've called the governor's press person. I've called the chief of staff's press person. I've called the secretary of public safety's press person. And I am getting the runaround with a capital R. Okay, that's the first thing you should know. Secondly, it has been difficult to get in touch with some of these local mayors. And so we're trying to pin down exactly. But at the end of the day, it was their responsibility, the local mayor's responsibility, to receive the container, distribute the goods, then call FEMA and say, hey, it's ready. So were the goods stolen? Were they distributed? And the trailer was just stolen. Look, Anne Marie, everyone is thinking, including FEMA, that these supplies were likely misused, that they weren't distributed. And you're talking about enough supplies. You're talking about tons and tons of supplies that could have been used to help upwards of, I don't know, 50,000 people, maybe more than that. And remember, Anne Marie, after the hurricane, we kept hearing water's not getting to where it needs to go. Food's not getting to where it needs to go, all this kind of stuff. Well, FEMA told me today, I said, listen, what's your response? And the guy who I was on the phone with said, David, in a way, this is a little bit of us pushing back and saying, see, we delivered 12 containers to various places. What happened to them? Now, again, FEMA delivered more than 10,000. 12 out of 10,000 is, when you put it in context, not terribly shocking, but it's important. And why are they just now turning up almost a year after the hurricane?
That's a great question. And I'm thinking, okay, so there are all these different groups that could possibly be involved here. There's local government, there's FEMA, I presume. And you know, when you started to talk about this, the first thing I thought of is this stuff's stolen, somebody's reselling it. I don't know if, some of these items have logos or if there's a way to know for sure that it came from FEMA and it shouldn't be sold. But I thought, if you follow the money, this really sounds fishy. So who's investigating here?
Okay, so you've got the federal security agency that is within FEMA that is now going out to get the warrant, right? You've got, for example, in Toa Alta, where the 3 containers were found on private property, you've got the municipal police that are investigating. Here's my next call when I get off with you to the FBI to find out if they're investigating, because this is important to know. Because they were FEMA containers, the property in the container is the property of the federal government. Stealing that would be essentially, arguably, a federal crime falling under the jurisdiction of the FBI. These were not donations from people. That's important. It's not like Anne Marie Green decided to send $500 worth of supplies that wound up in a container that went missing. These are items that FEMA paid taxpayer money to fill the container that now went missing. So you're talking about federal violations involving federal property that is now being investigated by a federal agency.
It is a heck of a story, David. I know you're going to make all the phone calls necessary. I'm really curious about, where these containers are. So hopefully we'll be following up with you. David Begnaud, thank you so much.
Thank you.
What you're looking at here is a man digging through rotten food which was destroyed after being delivered to Puerto Rico in response to Hurricane Maria ravaging the island. Now, the Daily Wire reported that this was actually food found in a dumpster, but I think it looks a little more like food in the back of a truck which was left exposed to the elements for multiple days and destroyed by both the elements and wild animals. But there's a lot of good news recently in Puerto Rico. Most notably, people once again on the island largely have power, and a full 96% of people are now back on clean drinking water. And all it took was the arrest of a corrupt mayor and two underhanded accomplices. But more on that in just a second. But the reality of Puerto Rico is that this place was a disaster long before Hurricane Maria ever touched the island. With a low median income of $20,000, $72 billion of debt, and failing infrastructure identified years back, it's no surprise the response went as poorly as it did. But it gets even worse from here. The utility companies on this island have long been known for corruption. They boast both bloated salaries and extraneous staff. But what makes things even more heinous is that it has been alleged that these utility companies extorted and took bribes from homeowners to have their utilities, their electricity restored. But that's not where it ends. They even took bribes from club owners, from restaurant owners, etc. to restore power to their businesses before restoring power to critical infrastructure such as hospitals. But to just put that last little cherry on top, these utility workers are even being accused of restoring power to their personal property before beginning work on many critical pieces of infrastructure. But knowing all of this, it's no surprise that plenty of aid might have been delivered to this island, but very little of it was ever actually delivered, at least not timely. It's almost laughable the mainstream media has attempted to tie this travesty on President Trump. But Trump was never one to take things lying down, and as he so aptly put in a tweet, the poor leadership by the San Juan mayor and other elected officials are the reason for this poor disaster response. But you don't have to take it just for him. As this training slide from Homeland Security points out, state and local government have a big responsibility in disaster response. Specifically, the mayor is called out as having primary responsibility for both community preparedness and community disaster response activities. But just to make this a little more, ironic, the San Juan mayor wasted no opportunities to have her face on national television and complain about the president, all while claiming to be non-political. Now take a look at this next interview. Notice her nasty woman t-shirt. At the same time she's saying it's not political. It's mind-bending. Take a look.
Bueno, número uno, lo que yo le dije, presidente, esto es sobre salvar vidas, no es sobre política. Y número dos, los que dicen eso son los que tienen...
I find it quite interesting they were having difficulties getting food and aid to Puerto Rico, but somehow they got that nasty woman t-shirt freaking UPS Direct next day air. It's interesting. But if there's a little bit of good news to come out of that, this woman, Carmen Cruz, is now being investigated by the FBI for corruption. I mean, all that aid arrived, but it didn't go anywhere. I wonder why. More on that in a second, though. But that investigation hasn't stopped her from being a political actor. Take a look at this tweet from earlier this year. She's wearing a hat with the number 4645. Now that number, 4,645, is supposed to resemble the number of people killed by Hurricane Maria and the disastrous response therein. Now, a quick fact check will tell you that 70 people were killed directly by the hurricane. Allegedly, these other thousands were killed by unknown second and third order effects. Typically, medical examiners will go through case by case and determine if those second and third order effects cause of death can be attributed to the natural disaster or not. But again, Puerto Rico did not have the disaster response template in place to make this possible. Thus, researchers decided to take a random sampling of 3,000 Puerto Ricans and ask them how many people in their community were killed. They then extrapolated that number to the entirety of the island and came up with this relatively random number, 4,600 and a few. So it's poor math. But now to get back to the mayor and his staff, which were arrested for corruption. Now, they were arrested for misuse of HUD funds. HUD funds are federal grants typically used to improve infrastructure and provide improved housing for the populace. Now, since that $8 million was pocketed rather than used to improve the infrastructure of the island, which potentially could have survived a natural disaster, it was used to line their pockets. So the real question here is, are they to blame for the death of potentially thousands of these people? Something to think about. But now we're in a position where Puerto Rico cannot pay off its debts, and many CEOs, such as the one interviewed here, refuse to do work in Puerto Rico because of corruption, and we have one big question left to ask. Did the San Juan mayor sabotage the disaster response in an attempt to make Trump look bad? Well, one fact checker known as Snopes decided they can't answer that question because it's, well, very hard to determine, so we'll just have to wait and see where this FBI investigation takes us.